Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And that brings us, that brings us to a collection that we have been discussing over the course of a number of videos. It is a wonderful multi-disc set with a number of feature films, 4 feature films in fact, with respect to or from the great filmmaker artist who is Eric Rohmer, and designated at spine number 1206 collectively. It is this set, which is Eric Rohmer's Tales of the Four Seasons, Eric Rohmer, Contes des Quatre Saisons. And we have been speaking about the works in this cycle of works, the cycle of films. And so that brings us to the 4th of such works. And this is the work which is described as being from the year 1998. And the filmmaker is Eric Rohmer. And the name of the work is, and please pardon me for my poor pronunciation of the language, I hope you can forgive me, but the name of the work is Contes d'automne, or A Tale of Autumn. Glorious, beautiful, poetic, charming, witty, warm, and welcoming work from the great filmmaker artist Eric Rohmer, written and directed by Eric Rohmer with an impeccable cast, some of whom we've actually seen in previous Eric Rohmer works, which we'll touch upon a little bit later in this discussion. But it's a wonderful cast, included in which are Marie Rivière and Béatrice Romand and Alain Libold and Didier Sandre, Alexis Portal, and others. Once again, please pardon me for my very poor pronunciation of the language. I hope you can forgive me. This is the work which is described as being from the year 1998, and it is Contes d'automne, or A Tale of Autumn. Splendid work. I'm I count myself so fortunate to have been able to now see this work, and indeed all of the works in the Tales of the Four Seasons cycle, a tetralogy of works. A real beautiful, lovely, charming, and affectionate work that's filled with a lot of warmth, and also the great, say, interplay, exchanges between human beings, characters, and romance, or the potential thereof, love and relationships, past relationships and possibly future relationships, and indeed current relationships, and how all of these different combinations and circumstances may indeed cross over into the other, and how things may change and may be affected by the workings and goings on of other relationships in another direction, based upon a certain group of key core characters that we meet in this context, in this setting, taking place in the nature of the countryside, the valley, the Rhone Valley, and also vineyards. The wine and grapes and vineyards are also very important, especially in the context of one key character. This is the Béatrice Romand character, who is a Magali, and also how the wine becomes a kind of catalyst for all the things to follow in terms of the planned wedding of the daughter of a couple, and the wife is Isabelle, who is the friend. She describes her as the best friend of Magali, and Magali's her best friend, but there is a certain rift between the daughter that is to be married and Magali that's expressed very early on because of some kind of tempestuous nature that Magali seems to be having in terms of her being devoted so much to the vineyards and to the growth of the grapes and the development of wine, so much so that she seems to have disregarded certain aspects of, say, a type of soft touch to human relationships, let's put it that way. And that might be due a lot to some aspects of her background, her own past relationships that are revealed in certain sort of character development revelations about her character. So we have in this way, Isabelle, the friend, the best friend of Magali, wanting to maybe do something for her friend, maybe trying to play a kind of romantic matchmaker for her friend. And so trying to see if there are any eligible bachelors in the neighborhood, in the community, trying to match such bachelor with her friend, because it is also acknowledged at some points in terms of where these people find themselves, where these characters find themselves in their lives at the moment, perhaps for people like Magali, who might seem to be interested in certain aspects of the vineyard and the growth of the grapes, etc. She does exhibit at certain points the maybe the curiosity and the desire and the want and the need to maybe try to meet new people as she is entering into this part of her life. And these characters are in their 40s or so, which is acknowledged by in one of the supplements, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And the ambiance of the nature and habitat and surroundings and the harvest, the theme of the harvest, and the idea of a kind of phase into a sort of a golden aspect with a golden hue. This type of phase, or entering into this type of phase. This has the aspect of the autumn, the autumnal, which I think is that there's also the room for a type of celebratory nature, a harvest celebratory nature. Things that might come forth from certain, say, efforts and connections, right? So this is where I think the actual theme or leitmotif of autumn, I think, intertwines so beautifully with the plot and the character developments, as we see, for instance, in the possibilities of what Isabelle may have in store for her friend Magali. And it goes into some really interesting detail about singles ads in the local newspapers and magazines, and trying to meet people through the ads, and maybe adopting different identities to try to maneuver, almost perhaps in a Machiavellian way, certain potential suitors that may or may not be a suitable match, and maybe be have a nice chemistry with Magali. But then, what if the object of affection is not Magali herself, but Isabelle? And therein we have a really interesting potential triangle afoot, a love triangle afoot, and this is where the Alain Libault character, Gerald character, comes in, and whom does Gerald love? Is it Isabelle or is it Magali? And what if he approaches one but it offends the other? So all this potential hijinks and say miscalculation and mistaken identity is all part of the wonderful, say, mix of romantic, say, comic hijinks galore that is also set in the kind of backdrop of a warm and golden and laid back atmosphere that is so, I think, set up richly and beautifully in the hands of Eric Rohmer and company. It's a really lovely treat. I mean, that's not all in terms of the core characters as well, because we also have a young woman who is the girlfriend of Beatrice Roman's character's son, Magali's son, and but Magali and this young woman who is Rosine, they strike up a friendship as well, a very deep and very intimate friendship, companionship, and also talking. And also Rosine herself thinks that it would be a good idea to try to set Magali up with someone, and Rosine, as a young woman who knows her former professor and a former intimate lover, in fact. This is the Didier Sandre character, and how the young woman, tries to set up set up Magali with this professor type. But of course, that might bring with it its own set of baggage and own set of romantic hijinks, because what if the professor is still in love with the young student and the young woman? The Alexia Portal character. And what if there is the attempt at trying to set up Magali and the professor, but maybe his affections might be towards Magali, maybe his affections might be towards Rosine, maybe his affections might be towards someone else completely different. So who knows? You'll have to watch the film to find out. And how does this plot of Rosine somehow or another coincide or intertwine or collide, potentially even, with the plot of Isabelle? The Marie Riviere character. You'll have to watch the film to find out. And how will Magali feel about this, right? Because she is, in many ways, in the center of these various Machiavellian plots. How does she feel about this? I mean, what is her feeling and emotion? Does she feel used? Does she feel betrayed? Or does she feel like she wants to go along with it in a type of frolic and maybe an effort? And perhaps an effort is just at in a kind of afternoon, a lovely warm afternoon of life, another effort to try to find potentially love and romance and companionship in her life at this very moment. So, and how will she feel if certain miscommunications and mistaken identities cause one couple to potentially form, but at the risk of offending her or making her jealous? What will happen to the friendships that are initially there, if at all? Will old friendships break down and die? Will new relationships and new romances be forged, or will everything fall apart like the delicate and perhaps imbalanced house of cards that this all seems to be? Or will all things turn out okay in the end? You'll have to watch and find out. It is a remarkable, again, a brilliant, a lovely set of type of romantic musical chairs on the one hand, and also a very warm and loving and welcoming atmosphere. That's touching, and I think it's touching because of a number of factors. I think the performances here are, again, through the roof outstanding. Marie Ruffier and Beatrice Roman as Isabelle and Marie, respectively. They have this sense of longing, but kind of, I think, a sensibility about it, which I think is very grounded and very much very accessible. But also we can understand a certain degree of passion and curiosity and playfulness that's part of the game of maybe meeting new people, whether it's for trying to find maybe matchmaking or romantic interest, or even simply, or perhaps in another way, meeting people for the sake of meeting people, making new connections, meeting potentially new friends. I mean, there is a curiosity innate in these two characters that I think is shown through in a lovely, playful gesture that is, I think, indicative of their warmth of spirit and their maybe their yearning to find connections, which I think is very understandable. And it also brings to the fore aspects of their own lives, respectively. A little bit about Beatrice Roman's character's past, her own life prior to when we meet her, and also Isabelle's own life and her own married life. And perhaps will there be any type of indication as to how her life with her husband might or might not be affected with all the things that are going on, all the planning that's going on, all the new faces that are emerging in this ever growing field of people who seem to be maybe related to or otherwise subject of this potential matchmaking. So what will happen with Isabelle and her approach and to relationships? Will she be affected? I mean, this is also a very interesting dynamic that's introduced. And also the friendship between Isabelle and Magali. This is really quite warm and lovely. It is these two performers and actors, of course, they are, we've seen them. For those who know previous Eric Rohmer works, you might recognize, for instance, the great film, which is called in English The Green Ray. And there's an interesting way in which this these characters in the Tale of Autumn, Isabelle and Magali, could be said to be a kind of play on or role reversal of a similar type of situation that we saw in The Green Ray. So it's a very interesting way in which all the films seem to be inhabiting or speaking upon each other, not just within the Tales of the Four Seasons cycle, but throughout the entire filmography of Eric Rohmer. I mean, it makes one very curious, and I think very excited to potentially, I hope, explore more works of Eric Rohmer if you enjoy these films. And there is a kind of sense of a celebratory nature. There's also a sense of maybe the some maybe hints or nuances of doubt, or perhaps unknown, or maybe a slight hint of melancholy in the air. I mean, that I think is so apropos, the feeling of autumn, the feeling of fall, after all. I mean, it is the end of summer into a new season, and there's this idea of harvest or some kind of cultivation, and so that also brings with a sense of celebration, a harvest festival of sorts. Here we have a wedding festivities that is the occasion to bring together a whole bunch of people in this social setting, dancing and a celebration of a new marriage, a new union, and celebration of family and friends, etc. So it has this wonderful atmosphere of vivacious and liveliness. But there's also the hint of melancholy and sadness, because there's a feeling, a kind of rumor or sense, that the type of golden hue of maybe the end, while it's not immediate, it is somewhat approaching. So we are maybe in the one of the earlier latter stages, as it were, autumnal stages. And so maybe there is a hint of perhaps what is there after this phase of the lives of these characters. And what will happen beyond beyond the frame, beyond the corners of the screen after the film ends? Will things be intact and things be happily ever after, or will there be a little bit of a hint of doubt or not being sure, etc.? I mean, this is, I think, the great wonder and spice of life, that little hint of not quite being sure, even in the throes of satisfaction and a lovely warm happiness, perhaps in the company of people of one's friends and family and loved ones, etc. But maybe even in that comfort, there might be the little hint of the slight golden hue of something approaching us that might feel like an end chapter. Who knows? But we're not quite there yet, but there might be a hint of it. That's what I think is so melancholy, poetry touching with this work. That is also very funny and warm and witty, and the type of, as I say, musical chairs aspect, or potentially anyway, of who will get together with whom, and that is also part of the charm. And there are some relatively speaking, high stakes here as well, when jealousies maybe get the better of people, and how that will potentially fracture relationships, or maybe have the potential of allowing people to then reevaluate one's relationships with other people, and maybe that might lead to some better place all around. Again, you'll have to watch the film to find out if you have not yet seen this great film already. This is a glorious film in the Tales of the Four Seasons cycle. I've mentioned it before. It's like if one had to ask what my favorite film is in the cycle, it's very hard to say. Maybe it's the film of the moment. So now I'm talking about Tale of Autumn, and so maybe now this is my favorite film. I mean, I love this film. This is really quite remarkable. What a remarkable work, and it's great to see these wonderful performances of haunting delicacy and curiosity at work here. And Alain Libault, I love his reactions, and Didier Sandre as well, and also the kind of energy, the sort of high degree energy of Alexia Portal, the young woman who is Rosine, one of Maralie's friends, who's trying to set Maralie up. And then the strength of the of two of the other leads, of course, this is Marie Rivière and Béatrice Rohmer. The strength of their warmth and the nuance, the little looks that they might share, or the glances that they might have, the feelings of maybe being alone, or maybe a sense of not quite knowing how to proceed, how to interact socially. Magali has this wonderful, Beatrice Roman's performance has this wonderful sense of vulnerability that shows through in a very in ways that are, I think, also very affectionate as well. That's a brilliant performance by Beatrice Roman, and also the complex nature of Marie Rivière. I mean, the more one thinks about the positioning of the character of Isabelle, the more one realizes that it's a really complex, really complex positioning of a complex character. Well done indeed. This is a brilliant, beautiful film as a type of the fourth and final film in this Tales of the Four Seasons cycle. And so it has that feeling and air of maybe nostalgia and melancholy as well, because you also know that this is the end. You can always, of course, revisit the films, including A Tale of Autumn, but there's a sense also of maybe a slight air of sadness as we are guided towards the conclusion and credits and then the close of the film. So, but I think that's also part of the design. Which is also consistent with, again, our travels with these beautiful characters that are on display in this brilliant work by Eric Rohmer. This is Conte d'automne, or A Tale of Autumn. The Criterion Collection has released this film, A Tale of Autumn, Conte d'automne, as part of this cycle of films, multi-disc Blu-ray set, Eric Rohmer's Tales of the Four Seasons. It is on one of 4 discs, and so A Tale of Autumn. And I have the disc in the machine right now, and so it has the movie and chapters, supplements, and subtitles in terms of the menu. We'll talk about the subtitles, we'll talk about the supplements that are included with this 4th disc of the Tales of the Four Seasons Criterion release in a little bit. But before we do, let me just once again briefly speak about the transfer materials as part of this release, again relying on the great staple booklet, and on page 26 thereof it says, and I quote once again, about the masters. The new digital masters presented here were created at Digimage in Paris from the 35mm original camera negatives for A Tale of Springtime, A Tale of Summer, and A Tale of Autumn, and from the 60mm original camera negative for A Tale of Winter, and restored in 2K resolution. The original monaural soundtracks were remastered from the magnetic tracks. So much like my feelings and comments on the previous masters, or the masters for the previous films that we were discussing, springtime, winter, and summer. Here for A Tale of Autumn, the film, there's a golden hue to the proceedings because of the wonderful locations, outdoor setting, the Rhone Valley, and a lot of the golden, the sun, and also the interior scenes. Even the nighttime scenes have this sense of a type of end of summer, beginning of autumn air, which I find very lovely and warm indeed. And the warmth and the hue of the warmth feels also very modest. And I use that word 100% complimentarily. Really, I do, because one of the great strengths, I think, of Eric Rohmer's works is this degree of modesty. But that air of modesty, I think, shows forth, reveals so much, and also leaves hidden just enough for us, the viewers, to give room for the characters to live and breathe and grow, and also for us to wonder ourselves, not just about what the characters might be thinking, but how this might affect us in terms of reminding us of certain life choices that we might have made, or maybe relationships that we might have encountered directly or indirectly, etc. So I think this is really lovely and precious and delicate, and so I just love the way this looks and sounds here, courtesy of this release from Criterion. So I do love this indeed. And then turning our attention, if I may, to the supplements, I can go to the supplements menu here, and I press the button, and it brings us to 2 supplements once again. First is Eric Rohmer on A Tale of Autumn, and it says here, and I quote, In this excerpted audio interview conducted by film critic Michel Simon in 1998, director Eric Rohmer discusses the making of the fourth and final installment of Tales of the Four Seasons. This is another audio excerpt with, when you play it, you've got the rolling tape motif in the background. Here it's a slightly different color. I think it's sort of a burgundy red color, which I think is really apropos in terms of the wine and all that, which is great. This is, excuse me, this is totaling approximately 12 minutes. And so Eric Rohmer is asked here, for instance, about any type of overarching themes throughout the entire cycle of the Tales of the Four Seasons films, and also how this maybe compares and contrasts with the way in which there might be connections made between the films or among the films in, say, the earlier cycle of works called Six Moral Tales. How Eric Rohmer says as a kind of comparison point that initially he didn't intend for there to be any connections between and among the Six Moral Tales when he was writing out the novellas or the stories, but then those connections kind of emerged to him, or he recognized them a little bit later. Here, for the Tales of the Four Seasons films, he recognizes too that they can each act on their own, and they do, but it's also tempting to maybe connect them, and maybe he might have his own way, but he doesn't want to intrude upon how viewers might view and maybe connect the films in their own way. But what he mentions here is maybe there's a way in which the films that are a tale of springtime and a tale of autumn might be connected, and also a tale of summer and a tale of winter might be connected. So for the former connection, springtime and autumn, the idea of maybe the process of thought and trying to manipulate situations. I mean, this is, I think, very much part of the key. This is key to the plots of each of the films. A Tale of Springtime, de Printemps, and A Tale of Autumn, this film, Conte d'automne. And then for the connection between A Tale of Winter and A Tale of Summer, Conte d'hiver and Conte d'été, we have the idea of fate or faith guiding or not guiding, as the case may be, the choices of the characters that are of those films. So I think these are really, really very reasonably made connections. And of course, I think there are undeniably other connections that can be made crossing the boundaries of, say, the other films. So summer to spring, springtime, and then winter to autumn, and then also other combinations of the sort. So, then there's an interesting aspect about the filming and, say, similarities and differences. I think film critic Michel Simon makes the observation about how, and maybe the way and manner in which the films were shot are slightly different depending on the film. He compares, for instance, A Tale of Summer with sort of gliding shots of people talking. The camera follows them as they talk, whereas here we have, in A Tale of Autumn, we have reverse shot compositions that I think are part of the milieu primarily, and I find that that's a really astute observation that he makes, and this leads into a conversation for Eric Rohmer in terms of style and cinematography, and examples of this, and how even shot composition and also character positioning has a lot to do with that type of establishing a certain, say, a distinct style for each of the films respectively. So for instance, even in automobile scenes that he mentions here, he mentions about how automobile scenes or scenes involving, say, motion and train tracks or carriages or public transport, say in A Tale of Winter, might have had sort of the integrity of one character and then talking and then cutting to another character talking, facing each other. But here in A Tale of Autumn, there are some key scenes in automobiles where characters are shot from the front and they're sitting next to each other, so in the same shot, which is to suggest, as Eric Rohmer here does, that maybe they aren't being truthful to each other at this particular moment in time. So that's a really interesting juxtaposition between two separate, distinct ways of composing otherwise similar shots of characters talking in automobiles or vehicles or public transit, as the case may be. So this is really interesting. And then also, Michel Simon and Eric Rohmer make the point about working with actors, Beatrice Roman and Marie Rivière are mentioned, and also the connection not just with this film, but also with the Green Ray, which is what I mentioned earlier. So, and Eric Rohmer talks about how he really felt that these two actors not necessarily out of a sense of loyalty of working with them again per se, but really he felt that they were the perfect choices for these characters. But it was wonderful to see them again. And indeed, there are some great, as I mentioned, and as is mentioned here as well, there's a really nice, interesting sense of role reversal in connection with the earlier Rohmer work. So that's really fascinating. There's some talk too about working with maybe a stock company of actors. Maybe some filmmakers prefer this, other filmmakers do not. So Eric Rohmer gives his own comments on this in this aspect. And then also the comment is made about maybe most of the main characters in this film, A Tale of Autumn, are or around their 40s, except for the character of Alexis Portal's character. Most of the main characters are in their 40s, and was that on purpose or not? And Eric Rohmer actually has a very candid discussion about it. How in many of his films, he has films. His films have, excuse me, characters whose a wide variety of ages. So, but here he happens to work with characters in these stages of their lives. So, this is a very fascinating discussion indeed. In any event, yes, this is the great audio discussion, 12 minutes with Eric Rohmer. So please check it out if you can. It's really great. And then the second of the two supplements is, in English, it's called A Farmer in Montfaucon. And I understand this is Fermière à Montfaucon. And once again, please pardon me for my very poor pronunciation. I hope you can forgive me. But this is described here as this short 1968 documentary directed by Eric Rohmer follows a woman farmer in Montfaucon, France, whose livelihood is threatened by new industries developing in the region. This is approximately 14 minutes. This is a very fascinating almost portrait of this woman who is a farmer and lives and has her livelihood and also her family's livelihood on the farm that we are shown glimpses of the house and also the work and the aspect of the work and the labor that is involved and necessary for the maintenance of the farm and farming activities. Also certain aspects of her life and her family, kind of aspects of specific to her and her domestic life. And also, there's some aspects of farming in preparation for the harvest and the autumn, which I think has its own linkages to A Tale of Autumn, which I find, therefore, the inclusion of this short film with A Tale of Autumn as Tale of Autumn supplements, I think is very apropos, so well done for that. But also, this woman mentions to acknowledges herself occasions where she might feel a sense of isolation and loneliness. And not quite sure what to do with her time sometimes. And then that leads into an interesting episode within the scope of the approximately 14 minutes of the running time. It leads to an interesting episode outside of the farm, in fact, going into the community and the community life, and also a sort of a community council life, and talking about maybe a certain board or a municipality of sorts. So sharing her voice and her views and opinions for the hope of bettering sort of the community overall. So a very fascinating and very intimate look as part of this set. So it's wonderful to have this included here. And again, it has a lovely link, I think, with A Tale of Autumn. So it forms a nice double bill in that way. So it's nice to have it included here. This is the 1968 documentary Fermière à Montfaucon. So please check this out if you can. And that concludes the supplements that can be found on A Tale of Autumn disc. So on paper, it seems rather maybe light in terms of quantity, but again, that's okay because the Eric Rohmer conversation I think is really wonderful, and we have also the film itself to guide us. So I would have loved to have seen more, of course, and that's true I think overall in terms of the supplements here, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a separate video with my overall comments. But despite my wanting to know more and hear more and not wanting it to end, I'm still wonderfully comforted by the fact that we are getting, in addition to these supplements, the wonderful main feature treat that is A Tale of Autumn. And then let me conclude my conversation here by talking very briefly about the booklet. Again, we will talk about the comprehensive essay, the great comprehensive essay, and other aspects of the packaging, the cover art design, and other aspects of the art motifs that are throughout this great set in a separate and final video, a wrap-up video discussion. But with regard to A Tale of Autumn, let me point out the Tale of Autumn specific pages to be found on pages 10 and 11 with a lovely synopsis of the film on the top of page 10. And then the essay, it does have, it's the essay by Imogen Sarah Smith. It does have, it is a comprehensive essay, so it's touching upon all of the Tales of the Four Seasons films. But it does have some parts that are A Tale of Autumn specific, so that might be worth checking out. I would strongly recommend, and I'll mention this again later, but I would strongly recommend that you watch all the films first, and then you can read the great essay by Imogen Sarah Smith. But in any event, we'll talk about our final remaining thoughts and wrap-up discussion and overall thoughts about this set. We'll talk about that in one more video. So I hope to see you at the next video, my dear friends, if you are interested. But for now, this has been A Tale of Autumn, Conte d'automne, a lovely, spirited, lively film that has the hint of melancholy, the golden hue of things that might come to end, not immediately, but maybe some ways down the line. But we still have time to enjoy sort of the celebratory harvest and the possibility of coming together and connections. So, a lovely film indeed. This is the work which is A Tale of Autumn. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. There's one more video that I'd like to upload with regard to a discussion of this great set, so I hope to see you there, my dear friends. But whatever the case, whatever the case may be, I sincerely hope that you continue to be happy and healthy and well, and that you continue to watch a lot of great movies, such as Tale of Autumn, such as other films in the Tales of the Four Seasons cycle, such as other works by Eric Rohmer, such as other films in the Criterion Collection, and beyond. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers. Salut.